your governor, Governor Brian Kemp. Governor Kemp appointed you to the Senate. You've criticized the election process as well. So tonight, can you tell us where your loyalty lies as you vie to represent the state of Georgia? Is it with Governor Kemp or President Trump?
Lisa, my loyalties are with Georgia. I had a calling to public service to serve the people of Georgia. Look, I have lived the American dream. I want to make sure every Georgian can do that. From working on a farm, from waitressing, being the first in my family to graduate from college, I know that free enterprise is the way to lift everyone up. Not socialism, not high taxes, not big government, not open borders, not the chaos of defunding the police that the left wants, not the lockdowns. I'm making sure that Georgians know what's at stake on January 5th. Our way of life right here in Georgia will radically change, as promised by Chuck Schumer. Now we take Georgia, then we change America. That's my number one focus, making sure that Georgians know what's at stake. I have served Georgians every single day. It's been my honor, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, if everything is at stake on January 5th, that would presume that President Trump has lost. Is that what you're saying?
You know, what's at stake is the Senate majority. This will determine who brings bills to the Senate floor. And under the Republican Senate, we've been able to deliver $3 trillion of relief to hardworking Americans hard hit by this pandemic, to the frontline workers, to hospitals, to schools. We have to continue to make sure that we open up our economy. The Democrats want to keep this locked down. They want to radically change our country. And their agent of change is radical liberal Raphael Warnock, someone that has said to reimagine police, that is endorsed by organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. We know the direction the country would take, and we're going to continue to make sure that Georgians understand that our very way of life here in Georgia and across the country is under attack by the left.
Well, not to belabor the point, but all those things that you're warning about would not be happening, presumably, with President Trump as president. So it almost sounds as though you're conceding that that part of it has been settled, and now it's important for the Republicans to keep the majority in the Senate to have a divided government.
Well, I saw firsthand that the Senate is the shock absorber in this country. And I saw that firsthand when I got to Washington and the impeachment trial started. I saw the Russia hoax and how that distracted us from addressing this virus. The Democrats have played nothing but politics since day one. They've never accepted that President Trump was president. They were distracted from serving Americans. They were distracted during the pandemic, and now they've used the pandemic to try to fundamentally change this country and put the cost of big government on the back of hardworking Georgians. That's why I'm fighting to make sure that the Republican majority is retained in the Senate, because we are the shock absorber for common sense policies that bring Americans together, that lift everyone up, that provides for great educational choices for kids, that stops the radical agenda of the abortion on demand that Democrats want, that attacks our Second Amendment rights. They want to take away our guns. They want to tax guns, and they want to fundamentally change America, and radical liberal Raphael Warnock is their agent of change.
Greg Bluestein, time for your question.
Yeah, Reverend Warnock, if Democrats do win control of the U.S. Senate, there will be pressure to increase the size of the U.S. Supreme Court. Would you support adding more justices to the Supreme Court to offset President Trump's recent appointments? And do you think there need to be term limits for justices on the bench?
I want to point out that Kelly Loeffler actually voted to defund the police. She voted against the COPS program. She was one of only 10 United States senators who did. I don't think we should defund the police, but we certainly do need criminal justice reform. We need to make sure that we have an independent review process when civilians die at the hands of police. We need to make sure that police and officers and departments that have a pattern of misconduct are held accountable. We can do that and celebrate police at the same time. And as I move all across the state, Greg, people aren't asking me about the courts and whether we should expand the courts. I know that's an interesting question for people inside the Beltway to discuss, but they're wondering when in the world are they going to get some COVID-19 relief? They haven't gotten any from Kelly Loeffler in months. And when she had a chance to stand up for ordinary people, she thought $600 was too much. Meanwhile, she was busy dumping millions of dollars of stock, profiting from a pandemic. Who does that?
But
I'd like
it
to
will
respond,
impact
please.
people on the ground. So I am wondering if you can answer the question, do you support expanding the Supreme Court?
I'm really not focused on it. And I think that too often, the politics in Washington has been about the politicians. I'm a pastor, and so when I think about these issues, I think about the people that I've had to stand with in the critical care units while their loved one was dying or between life and death. And not only are they concerned about the sickness, they're wondering how in the world they're going to pay for it. If Kelly Loeffler has her way, 1.8 million Georgians with pre-existing conditions, that means people with hypertension, people with diabetes, folks who've had a stroke, cancer, people who are recovering from COVID, would not be able to get health care. I think that's morally wrong. And it's my faith that actually informs that. She can't explain why she wants to take away people's health care. She knows that that junk health care plan that she rolled out has a loophole in it big enough to drive a Mack truck through. She can't explain that, and so she's trying to misrepresent my record. But the people of Georgia understand. They understand the truth.
Senator, 30 seconds, please.
Yes. Look, you've just heard radical liberal Raphael Warnock lie about my record. I've never voted to defund the police. In fact, I've voted to support more funding that the Democrats, of course, blocked. But he also is distracting from the fact that he would pack the Supreme Court. That's outrageous. Justice Ginsburg herself said 9 justices is the right number. He would pack the court with radical justices that would legislate from the bench to fundamentally override the Constitution and our laws in this country. And Georgians need to know that is wrong for Georgia and our country.
Would you like 30 seconds to respond?
Well, I believe in the Constitution. This is the greatest system on the planet. And our country is the only country where my story is even possible. I believe in our norms. I believe in the separation of powers. And I believe in the nonviolent, unchaotic transition of power. Kelly Loeffler ought to stand with the people of Georgia. The 4 greatest words ever spoken in a democracy are the people have spoken. The people have spoken on the presidential election, and they're waiting on their senator to be focused on them, not the person in the White House.
Lisa Ram.
Senator Loeffler, given all the police violence we've seen against African Americans, consider this. Courtney Owens of Atlanta is worried about her son, her father, and her husband, all African Americans. She fears for their lives daily. You've called the Black Lives Matter movement fascist. You've alienated members of your own basketball team by talking about that stance, or taking that stance, rather. Is that still your view tonight after seeing and hearing how it hits home with so many people personally? And what conversation would you sit down and have with Courtney Owens?
Well, the life of every African American is important, and there is no place for racism in this country. But there are organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. And we know that that hurts minority communities more than anyone, and we have to stand with our men and women of law enforcement, and I will always do that. You know, that's a distraction from the fact that my opponent does not stand with police officers. He's endorsed by organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. He's called police officers gangsters, thugs, bullies, a threat to our children. He's called for our prisons to be opened up and emptied out. He's called for the abolishment of the cash bail system. Look, he doesn't care about safety and security in any community, and I'm fighting to make sure that we have the resources to keep our communities safe and our police departments well-funded and well-trained.
Senator, thank you. Would you like to respond to
Sure,
particularly about opening up the jails?
Well, listen. First of all, the land of the free is the mass incarceration capital of the world. We warehouse 25% of the world's prisoners. And people on both sides of the aisle know that our current criminal justice system needs reform. And we saw that this summer, a multiracial coalition of conscience pouring out into American streets after the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others. And what did Kelly Loeffler do? She used her enormous privilege and power as a United States Senator to pick a fight with the black women on her team who know what it's like to grow up in a community where you have to have two talks with your children, one about the birds and the bees and the other about what happens if you're pulled over by police officers. To acknowledge that is not to condemn police officers in general. I've worked with police across the years. I've been invited to speak at their memorial services when they've lost their lives in the line of duty. And she says she is against racism and that racism has no place, but she welcomed the support of a QAnon conspiracy theorist, and she sat down with a white supremacist for an interview. I don't think she can explain that.
May I respond?
Let me give you a chance to respond to that, and then we'll have one last question before we get to closing statements, please.
Well, that's incredibly sad, these comments that he's made. I mean, first of all, there's not a racist bone in my body. I have worked to bring communities together my entire life. But this is really terrible coming from someone who has divided people continually. He's called on Americans to repent for their worship of whiteness. He's called Israel an apartheid state and said that we should end military assistance. He's compared Israelis defending themselves against Palestinians. He's compared them to birds of prey. And he's celebrated Jeremiah Wright, an anti-American, anti-Semite. That's divisive.
Greg Bluestein, one last question.
Senator, should members of Congress be barred from trading stocks?
Look, what's at stake here in this election is the American dream. That's what's under attack. When they attack me for a lie, a left-wing media lie, conspired with the Democrats by, this is an attack on every single Georgian who gets up every day to work hard to provide a better life for their family, who wants to live the American dream. It's a distraction from the real issues, not the conspiracies in this election. What's at stake is the future of our country, our freedoms to live the American dream, to not be taxed into bankruptcy, to not have to go onto government health care, government-run health care. They want to take away the health care that 180 million Americans rely on through their work. That's why I've introduced a health care plan to make it more affordable, not government-run health care that would bankrupt those that rely on Medicare. And I'm going to continue to fight to keep our country free, to keep our borders secure, and make sure that our communities are safe and secure.
Reverend, you have an opportunity to respond.
Well, I mean, the senator can't explain why the people of Georgia should send her back to the Senate. And so she's continued to misrepresent my record. She's lied not only on me, but on Jesus. I mean, everybody's clear about what that passage is about in Matthew. You can't serve two masters. And she should have listened to the lesson. Maybe she wouldn't be so focused on herself. She'd be thinking about the people she's supposed to represent. I intend to center the concerns of the ordinary people that I've been running into all across this state, particularly in rural Georgia.
Reverend, thank you.
I'd like to respond.
Well, we're out of time. I apologize, but you're going to have a chance for a closing statement here in a moment. That is all the time we have for questions. The candidates now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Senator Loeffler, you get to go first.
Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in to this important debate. You can see what's at stake. There are two visions for our country. Mine, the American dream. My opponent, socialism. This is what's on the ballot January 5th, the American dream. I was born and raised on a farm. I grew up working in the fields. I built my career. I became a job creator right here in Georgia, and I have been blessed to live the American dream. But Chuck Schumer said it best, now we take Georgia, then we change America. They would increase our taxes, open our borders, socialize our health care, And my opponent, radical liberal Raphael Warnock, is his agent of change, someone that has falsely used the Bible to attack our military. The Bible never said that that you can't serve God and in the military. He's attacked our police officers. He wants to fundamentally change America into a socialist country. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm working hard for every single Georgian. I'm Kelly Loeffler. I'm asking for your vote on January 5th. Thank you, and may God bless America.
Thank you, Senator. Reverend Warnock, your closing statement.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. I'm Raphael Warnock. I'm one of 12 children in my family, and I'm number 11, the first college graduate. Listen, these are dark and difficult times, and amidst the thick fog of this pandemic and the economic turndown, even during this season of joy, it's hard for people to find joy. I think about my dad in a moment like this. God bless his memory. He used to wake me up every morning at dawn and said, get ready, get dressed, put your shoes on. It was dawn. And so it was morning, but it was still dark. It's dark right now, but morning is on the way. It's our job, Georgia, to put our shoes on and get ready, because there are those who are engaged in the politics of division. They have no vision, and so they engage in division. Tomorrow is the last day to register. Tell everybody you know to make a vote plan, because health care is on the ballot, workers are on the ballot, voting rights is on the ballot, criminal justice reform is on the ballot, and if you give me the honor of representing you in the U.S. Senate, I'll be thinking about Georgia every single day.
Thank you very much, Reverend and Senator. Before we conclude this debate, everyone involved in tonight's production sends their condolences to the Loeffler campaign and to the family of staff member Harrison Deal, who was killed in a car accident on Friday. Our thoughts are with the family. They're with you. We're very, very sorry. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, January 5th. Absentee voting has already begun in Georgia, and early voting in Georgia begins December 14th. Thanks to the candidates and to the panel for participating in this debate. Well done. Thanks to the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging this debate. I'm Russ Spencer with Fox 5 in Atlanta. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Good night.